Understanding the trauma bond and the effects of trauma and PTSD is essential to break free from the self-blame regarding why you entered or stayed in an abusive relationship. I'm Lisa.Taylor-Austin, licensed psychotherapist and expert witness. The effects of the trauma bond are so complex. What happens is that bonds are created between the abuse survivor and the abuser that are very difficult to break. It also causes a great deal of conflicting thoughts and feelings as you attempt to reconcile the brutal reality of the abuse with the person that you once saw as your greatest confidant and love of your life, perhaps, in the early stages of the relationship. This cognitive dissonance is a defense mechanism that's often resolved not by seeing the abuser for who they really are, but rather by denying, minimizing, or rationalizing the abuse that's occurring. And we do this as a way to survive and cope with the trauma being experienced. For those who like to read about this, you might want to look up Carver, who wrote about this in 2004. This form of abuse amnesia is compounded by the nature of the abuse and the cycle of the abuse. As we learned earlier, abuse is often slow and insidious, building up over time from tiny infractions to major meltdowns. We see this with narcissists, where there's slight, difficulties and then a full narcissistic rage. So what was once like a glimpse of an abuser's false mask, occasionally slipping in the beginning, becomes a horrific cycle of idealization, devaluation, and eventually discard that the survivor has not only grown accustomed to, but also inadvertently becomes addicted to, due to the strength of the trauma bond that forms between the abuser and the victim. According to Patrick Carnes, trauma bonding occurs after intense emotional experiences with our abusers and tethers us to them, creating subconscious patterns of attachment that are very difficult to detach from. It's part of the phenomenon which is also known as Stockholm Syndrome, in which victims of hostage situations become attached to their perpetrators and even defend their captors. Trauma bonding is prevalent in abusive relationships, as well as kidnapping, hostage situations, and addictions. So Carnes goes on to describe that little acts of degradation, manipulation, secrecy, and shame on a daily basis take their toll, and trauma by accumulation sneaks up on its victims. These daily acts of degradation, stonewalling, projection, gaslighting, and verbal abuse are insidious. Triangulation and manipulation are the exact ingredients that culminate and create the insidious and covert abuse that's inflicted on us by narcissistic abusers. Narcissistic abuse creates an environment of fear, shame, and control in which victims are left constantly walking on eggshells, waiting for the other shoe to drop. They are betrayed emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially by their partners every day, by their condescending remarks, infidelity, pathological lies, put-downs, and name-calling. Although survivors of narcissistic abuse come from many different backgrounds, and anyone can be a victim of narcissistic abuse, trauma bonding is even more significant for those who grew up in violent or emotionally abusive homes, or for people who had a narcissistic parent in addition to their most recent experiences with trauma and abuse. I'd like to point out here that not all our abusers are narcissists, but all narcissists are abusers. Abuse happens in many different forms, and it's all pervasive with the narcissists. Survivors of multiple incidents of abuse by various narcissistic individuals can further reinforce subconscious wounds that the person has experienced in childhood in the trauma bond with their current abuser. Complex PTSD or CPTSD, same thing, develops from chronic trauma, a trauma that reoccurs over the long term, and it's often inescapable. In addition to the regular symptoms of PTSD, in which the majority of CPTSD victims also meet the criteria for, survivors with complex PTSD find that their ability to adapt to stress, interact with others, and regulate their emotions are severely affected. Chronic trauma can cause painful events that are seemingly minor to other people, but appear very life-threatening to the person. This is why the phrase "let it go" can be so damaging to victims of long-standing abuse and trauma. People don't really understand this. One of the worst things that you can do is tell someone who's in a traumatic experience or domestic violence situation to just get over it, leave the person, and move on. Although all those things we want to see the person do, if the person could just do it, they would. It's much more complex than that. So it's very important, if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, to get therapy and to get help. You might want to reach out to a domestic violence center in your area if indeed domestic violence is happening. But if it's insidious, psychological, emotional, getting help from a therapist who understands narcissism could be very beneficial to you. If this video was helpful to you, please like and subscribe to the channel and share the video with somebody you know, because you never know when you're helping someone else. Take care. See you next time.